He could have stayed. He left. I think he just wanted to tell him that he was going to introduce the show.
Oh.
I'll send him a DM.
Cool, thanks. All right, guys. Yep, looks like we're live. So, yeah, welcome everyone to the Earth Awakenings live show number 2. We had our launch episode yesterday, and I thought it went really well. So, yeah, I appreciate everyone's contributions. And so I wanted to mention too that this show is it's a daily show. So we'll have it be roughly every day. There could be some days off in between, but it'll be a daily show. And you can look up at the top of the Discord in the upper left, there's a little event page. So that'll always list when there's a show for the following day. And also wanted to mention that anyone listening to this on YouTube or listening to it later on YouTube, this is all being streamed from the Earth Awakenings Discord platform. So you can join the conversations. You'll see on the live stream down in the lower right, there's a link that you can go to directly and to come right into the Discord. And also in the description of the YouTube, in the YouTube description, the link is in there as well. So one thing I wanted to mention just in general, I was thinking that in the future that we could do, because we've talked in the past about having definitive tests, definitive measurements or tests when it comes to the Earth, the shape of the Earth. And so one thing I was thinking that we could do, we could either do it today or we could do it at another point, but would be to essentially have something like definitive Earth measurements, something like that, like the title for it to be that, where we could basically discuss, which we've been doing over the last, years, but also on this platform in the previous weeks and months, we've had some sessions going deep into that. So yeah, I was thinking that could be an interesting thing to do as well, to sort of have a time period where we discuss definitive measurements and whether it's ways to carry them out now or just ideas and brainstorming. And there's several that we already have that I think would be interesting to bring up, back to the table again to reflect on and be able to, progress those forward so that we can be able to get those ironed out and carried out, as time and funding allows for. So I thought that would be an interesting thing to do. But yeah, I think that's kind of the completion of the introduction for the start of the show. So just kind of open the floor a bit, and I'm open to how we want to do this one. We could do the definitive Earth test, in the first hour or the second hour, or so that's an option. And I'm also just open to options for the show. So how you guys doing?
Yar.
Good. I like the idea of having we had a good show yesterday. I'm trying to get the word out there on TikTok and stuff, putting comments, come check us out. We do a live show every day at 5 p.m. Eastern. If anyone wants to come join us or listen, come join the Earth Awakenings Discord server. And I'm looking forward to maybe we can get some definitive test on if the water's curving or not. Still water. So.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly fascinating discussion in terms of getting to something definitive. Of course, we've been told the Earth is a globe and all the rest of it and all the discussions, but to be able to have something that is definitive, that is ultimately not debatable, meaning something that's physically, because of course we have optics, and there's so many different angles of discussing when it comes to the Earth and what the Earth is, the nature of reality. There's a whole philosophical lineage of that. There's information that people are doing, whether that's agencies, space agencies and whatnot, or government agencies that are giving their claims. But to be able to have something that's independently verifiable in terms of a physical measurement, something that's definitive. Of course, if it's definitive even in one area, it would have to be done in more areas around the Earth to confirm that. But yeah, like you said, Jeremy, it is water curving. That, ultimately, I mean, that's in a sense, that's what it all
Still
boils down.
water. Yeah, still water. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned something new yesterday with that thing with PNS was so everyone was telling them you could go take measurements, you could go look at water, you could go do this. He's like, nope, not going to do any of that stuff. And then finally, I'm like, here, well, what will you do? He'll look out his window, some sort of agoraphobic version of something. So then somehow that means it's still my observation, not his. So I was wondering what other avenues that would apply to. Like someone would say, hey, they tell somebody, I want to take a college class. The person's like, oh, no problem. You just gotta go to administrations and sign up for a class, maybe take an entry exam. And they're like, but I only want to open my window. And the person's like, well, the best you can do is just watch college students go past you as they go to their classes. Kind of like the squirrel comment, right? Where he was like worried that the squirrels were looking for food, but he might not find food.
I like lasers. I do for testing. I've never
Lasers
done
work.
never
the
done
lasers
it, but I like them
been
as an idea.
Well, let's do that. Let's go ahead and just do the first hour here. We'll do the definitive Earth measurements discussion, and we can carry it into the second hour if it's cooking, or we could shift to the second hour. I see White's word is on the panel here. I don't know if White's, if you're able to speak right now, but I would love to, if you'd like to do just like a sharing your measurement test and so yeah, just if
Bring the diagram up. Bring that diagram up because that has it all laid out perfectly. His little diagram of all the spots and everything where you would take your measurements. Do you have it, or like can you put stuff on the screen? So
well, he just put in the he just said he's not able to voice at the moment. So maybe we'll, because I think if we're going to bring that diagram up, I think it'd be best if he could be able to describe it from his words. So if we're going to talk about Earth measurements, then we could kind of save his, or unless he's able to pop in a little bit later, maybe in the second hour.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, if we could, it sounds crazy, but if there was any way to like take a mold of like a level surface, because you can make a straight line if you're not worried about up and down. If you have a relatively, level surface, you can snap a chalk line on it indefinitely and, know that you're going to be fairly close to accurate. There might even be a better way than snapping a chalk line. I don't know, but if you're only worried about left to right straightness, then that's not an issue. It's when you try to make a straight line and you're worried about the up and down aspect. That's when it's a problem. So if you could take a mold of like a level surface and then flip it on its side or something, you'd only need like a few hundred feet of that, or a few hundred meters or something. I don't know, a quarter mile. How much curvature is in a
quarter mile of a levels of a mold or a level surface on its side? What?
I know it's that one's pretty out there.
Well, I think the mold idea is interesting. I mean, I think when we're talking about this, I don't think they're.
I just don't get it.
No idea is a bad idea, is what I'm saying. I mean, I think it's good to think about that. I think the mold idea is interesting. It's a little bit similar to White's, which like I said, I'd like to for White's to be able to present it himself, just to give him the opportunity to. But that idea of basically forming something to the surface to see whether what the actual geometry is.
Yeah, I know. I think it'll be too big. You can't do a mold that big.
Well, they make this stuff called it's some kind of special wire, right? And when it gets hot or you can like shape it. And then if you get it hot or cold, it like regains the shape you put it into. It was super expensive. They sell it by like the fucking centimeter or something. Right? I think we went over this on Brandon's show. It cost like $11 million for the length you would need to make a mold of level, flip it on its side, let it regain its shape. And then you could measure that. But I mean, that was like a $10 million thing or something for that wire. It was crazy.
I have an easy one for you guys. Well, not that easy. It's cheaper than that. It's just an indoor canal that's quite dark, not fully dark, with lasers across the surface.
Yeah, but the lasers bend now, man.
Not indoors in the dark.
An indoor. That's interesting. An actual indoor laser. Well, I've also thought too, like maybe combined with that, if you had several lasers that were all at distances, sort of like force the line with lasers, where like if you had a wall or something that you could mark it on, and then you could verify that that line is straight in the best way possible. That way you could, in a way, like force the line to see if the laser is curving, and therefore to see if the earth beneath it, is as well.
That's all my idea. So, in the dark indoors to get rid of most of the refraction, then a strong laser, then you account for minimal dispersion or whatever you want to call it.
Like if you had a
You'd have
laser,
to you'd have to temperature control the entire facility, and then you'd still have to use a collimator.
yeah, if you had a laser level, like Gio was saying earlier, in a wall, you could just keep overlapping laser levels
But the
and
thing is with this,
go a
like with my
nice
idea,
stretch.
Flat Earth has to fund it, or Flat Earth has to convince a nerdy glober to fund it, because no normal glober's going to fund it. They
I
already
mean, there's
believe in
Globers
God.
willing to. There's a lot of people willing to put money up to bet and gamble
Yeah,
on whether they can, prove to certain people or whatever.
right.
But if you took that money, you might be able to actually do something with it. I don't know what you would even do yet, but
You're right. There is people willing to put money and stake it on trying to prove something.
would
the
Ruhif
other
say?
side.
Ruhif said he'd put 10 million or $1 million up or something. We
Something
could just
specific to Pete. Something specific to Pete, where Pete was offering something dumb. It was a guaranteed win bet.
If you had a laser
No.
at 5.
Go ahead, my bad. Go ahead. Who was going to say something about a laser?
The realm.
Yeah, if you had a laser at 5 meters above sea level, right, and then the laser at the other end, where it's the other end of your test across the lake or whatever like that, is at the same altitude, sea level, and you could agree to everything that they're exactly level with each other, but you have to account for sea level, and you would use barometer or whatever like that, and that would account for a factor as well.
Something like that's already been done, but again, it's it's inconclusive, sort of, because the possibility of light bending. But something
yeah.
like that has been done.
It dispersed, so we're not happy.
Yeah, so did it come back in that test? They shot the laser, and the laser returned and came back to the
It was just a one-way. It was a one-way with the flashlight. There were calculations made of a particular height you'd be to see the light if it's flat, particular height you would have to be to see it if it was globe. It was carried out. You can only see the light with the globe calculation.
Yeah, it was interesting because they were saying something about the second, how they do the second. No, they measured the speed of light. And Veritasium done a video on it, and he was like, but they've done it in one direction or something like that. It was like he tested it, and he said, the speed of light, the method was inconclusive, he thought. And we're doing the laser test, like shining a laser to a mirror, and then it reflects back to the source. That would help with verification, because with observation you might see refraction and all these words that we use, but the laser doesn't cut through level. So as long as you can fire it across and it can come back, and you can agree that your altitudes, your sea level, everything is exactly the same. Every single factor has been discussed and taken care of. I reckon you can have a good result that way. And lastly,
My bad. Go ahead.
lastly, I looked up how far can we see from 1 centimeter. Any guesses?
Altitude?
Is this geometrically, or is this in reality?
1 centimeter height off the ground.
That's what
So
I
you-
asked him. On hypothetical Earth or real Earth?
you don't know. You don't know, and you're kind of trying to see what can I
What
see.
type
But
of environment? I think that's what we're asking.
um,
Like, is this
assuming,
purely mathematical, purely
assuming
geometrical?
no, assuming a flat plane. How about that?
Oh, well, it depends if there's grass. If you're on a
Best,
salt flat, you should see quite far. I don't know how far. Quite far.
You would see
once,
as far as the atmosphere is too thick for you to see anything. The farther you can see, the more haze would exist. If you
Yeah,
remove
because
an atmosphere, you would be able to see forever.
yeah,
Witz had actually pointed out the other day that we got star trails and they're disappearing before they even hit the horizon.
Yeah, I was
Like the
going to say
horizon wasn't
you'd be
blocking
able
out the
to see the
stars.
stars.
The
On a salt
horizon
yeah.
flat,
wasn't
like
blocking
one
out the stars.
centimeter.
It was clearly the stars were clearly getting blocked out because just I don't know the atmosphere or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's their
Yeah.
parent horizon, man. Yeah, I agree with that. I see the Orion's belt come up in my east, and it's massive. It's fucking massive, and it's not the one that I saw a few years ago, but it was high up in the sky. It's on the horizon, and easily 4 times if you were to do a logical method to, you know what I mean. And I was thinking, is that just me, or is that the celestials closer to us, in this period of a cycle or something like that? Because 2 years ago, it would be high up in the sky. Um, yeah, weird.
Well, since you're mentioning the stars, I was gonna bring up, what do you guys think about in terms of something being definitive, like definitively being able to measure the shape of the Earth with sextants? Not trying to go into an entire discussion on sextants because I know it's a very deep topic. I'm just wondering in general, do you guys think that could be definitive? Meaning, if you're measuring angles to the stars and then the GP, circle of equal altitudes, and if all those circle of equal altitudes and the GPs all line up on a planar surface and it maps out planar, in your guys' mind, is that adequate for being definitive or not, because it does depend on the sky?
Yes, you can use the sky if you can navigate accurately, assuming a flat Earth. It'd be a very good validation for a flat Earth. If you can, if it requires assuming quote unquote a globe Earth, and that's the way you can navigate accurately, it's very strong evidence that it's a globe.
So yeah, the concept of as above, so below, and you're saying if you can navigate it successfully, then it indicates, well, it certainly indicates the positioning, like the coordinate positioning would be accurate based on what you're able to acquire from the sky in that case.
Yeah, I was thinking like along the lines of where we thought the celestial equator was, but actually we realised it's actually due to the different pattern altogether. In one way is like a flat Earth model where you've got everything spiraling above you, like an LP, a CD. But in fact, if you had another model like that looking down from above, which would be the northern hemisphere, and then you have a southern hemisphere, it's flat. It's pretty much like it's pretty much flat, and the diameter could be like way less. And actually, so the point was at one angle when you think you're looking at the celestials from one angle from underneath, and then the other half is looking at it from above, you're going to say we're going to see the same patterns. But if the one above thinks they are above, but actually they're about 22 degrees adrift, their angle to what they're looking at, depending on what you're in, where you are, and what shape it is, then you're going to get a different side view. Like you look at the number three, but then when you look at it from the side, it, you know, you can end up with a different outcome because of what you observed and where you observed it.
I wanted to ask Jeremy, in terms of when you were, when there was all that discussion what we were doing for those during those couple weeks there, the one the Earth measurement test with the lights and the stakes. Where are you at on that currently? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you still think that's viable? Is it still an interesting thing to carry out, or are there any modifications? Or I just wonder what your thoughts were on that one, at this time.
I was just going to say goodbye, guys.
Okay, Rome.
Oh, take care.
Yep. Talk to you later.
Thanks
Maybe.
for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe Jeremy's not at his mic. Are you trying to talk, Ed? Your mic's lighting up.
You asked me.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were. Well, yeah, your mic was lighting up. I thought you were trying to speak.
No, I was typing.
Bio, if you had infinite amount of money and resources, what would be your go-to test to get a definitive measurement of the Earth?
I'd go to space. It'd
Real
be
quick, the one with the lights. The one with the lights was it's a good idea. It sounds tricky, like it'd be tricky to set up.
or I would send other people to space because I already know, and I think the evidence is fine. I would, if I had an infinite amount of money, I would send other people to space.
So you wouldn't do anything to definitively measure the Earth. You would just depend on seeing the Earth from a high perspective.
I think Jesse's measurements are fine, and they're definitive measurements. I think reciprocal zenith angles are definitive measurements. I think the application of a sextant, I think that's definitive. I think there are many things that are definitive, but if I had infinite money for this conversation, I don't benefit by going to space and actually seeing Earth, but other people would. So I would. That's what I would do.
Okay, so you think there already are definitive measurements of Earth?
There are.
A shallow Earth?
Yeah, shallow. But no, there are definitive. There are. Jesse's measurements of the half-mile lake. That's a good one. It's over water. It shows curvature. You could say it could be just that local spot, but that's still curving water, conforming to a globe Earth. All reciprocal zenith angles, no matter the elevations, they show one thing. Zenith angles greater than 180. Can't have that on a flat Earth, especially the consistency and the distances that are measured. These are definitive measurements.
Is that the one you just posted?
Yeah, this one's good, and I like to use it because it has a methodology. So it's not just like here's some numbers. It's what's claimed to be measured. It's an entire methodology. The tools used, and he includes the manuals, all the measurements, as far as each total station, how high they are off the ground, and they're on each side. They're right on the coast. Then he even gives an optical view through the total station, just to that's your line of sight. These are measurements, da da da. And then it gives multiple measurements at the bottom, and then it also gives you the diagram of what's essentially being measured. These are definitive measurements. It would be more effective from a flat Earth perspective, especially someone like Bev, who totes these around, as well as Rakia. It'd be way more effective if they repeat these types of measurements, even if they do a quarter mile over water, even attempt a whole mile, just something to counter these. Because at the moment, it's just personal opinion as a rebuttal, which means fuck all because here are actual measurements. I'm not giving my opinion of on a globe we expect this. No, These are real measurements in reality. You have to fight that.
Do you want to walk us through this, like your understanding of how this works in your viewpoint?
It's super simple. You have a total station, theodolite, a device that sets up plumb at your local position, and then you're gonna set it to perpendicular, and then ideally, especially for this, if you're doing coast to coast, you would want your total station, its crosshair essentially, your horizontal, to be, let's say, 6 feet off the ground. Then you want some type of marker where you're shooting from to be 6 feet off the ground. So when you do your plumb and you set up perpendicular from that, you've established your horizontal plane, and then you're going to measure the deviation, if any, from that horizontal to your marker. So you're measuring from your 6 foot observer height to another 6 foot observer height, and you're measuring the deviation from horizontal. But you also want to go to the other side and then shoot back to your original point and take that measurement. If we're on a flat Earth, geometrically on a flat Earth, you should always measure 90. Because if you're at 6 feet and you're shooting to a 6 foot thing, on a level Earth, it's going to be your horizontal. There is no deviation. On a globe, you will have a deviation vertically down. So you'll have that 90 that forms your horizontal plus a little bit because you have to shoot down, obviously. And then what also confirms that is when you shoot back to it, you do expect that same thing to occur, 90 plus a little bit. So that's why you would get reciprocal zenith angles. You add them up. If it comes over 180, that is evidence for a globe.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with it. So how are these devices, in your understanding, getting the level? Because, that would be really what this is based on at the end of the day.
Perpendicular from your local plumb.
So how are they acquiring that in your understanding of it?
And there's a few methodologies. You can use one that's electronic and uses gravity in its local position, and then it'll give you your vertical, and then it's going to just go 90 degrees off of that vertical. You can do manual ways in which you actually hang a physical hanging mass, and then you just reach perpendicular off of that. I mean, it's that simple.
Real
I
quick,
couldn't give you the step-by-step with a electronic theodolite. I couldn't give you the step-by-step process, but that is how it's done.
Real quick, if you have mass attracting mass on a flat Earth, do you still have parallel plumb lines on a flat Earth, or no?
You would. So
Even if
let's
mass
assume,
attracted mass on flat Earth?
yeah. So let's assume that for mass attracting mass to remotely possibly be true on a flat Earth, it would have to be infinitely large as well as infinite in depth. So below your feet,
And if it
would have to be
wasn't,
infinite.
if it wasn't infinitely large and infinitely deep, you might have non-parallel plumb lines on the flat Earth. No.
Sure. Yeah. Because
Yeah. All right.
if you're on as far as a globe, the explanation would be the mass to your left and the mass to your right is equal. So there is gravity pulling from the right and left, but it's equal in both directions, so they cancel each other out. So that's why with all of those cancellations, it's just vertical because there's nothing above you to cancel that. But yes, on a flat Earth, if you were, let's say there is an ice wall and there's nothing beyond that. If you're at the ice wall, you have all the mass to the right and no mass to the left. It would skew to the right because that's where
we would have.
Is.
So we would have plumb lines not being parallel on a flat Earth. Yeah.
Right. In that specific scenario, yeah, you would.
Yeah. But this was your whole premise. Yeah. Your whole premise was that these plumb lines aren't parallel, so therefore a globe, right?
Well, they also point away from each other because if we were to take the circle flat Earth with an ice wall surrounding it, and that's it, there's no mass around that. What you would expect is, let's say you're in Australia. So you do have mass to your left, but not as much, or you do have mass to the south, but not as much mass as to the north. So what we would expect is the plumb would point towards the north in that scenario. And then as you circle that flat Earth, it would just it would essentially be a compass. It would always point north because that's where more mass is. But we don't have that effect. So
Here, I got a question there. This is really good stuff, by the way. So what if the outside, though, is deeper than the center point. Like almost like there's like a hollow cone on the underneath.
It would just point to wherever more mass is. I can't really picture what you're describing, but
Well, like-
the response would be wherever there's more mass, it'll point it. It would tend to favor that direction.
Okay, so like around, like, so what you're thinking here is that the ice wall would end and all the mass would be either to your left or to your right, depending on which way you're facing.
Like always north. I guess that'd be the best way. Yeah.
But what if there's less stuff there? Because
Oh, I see what you're saying. So like it's less material to the north.
yeah, like the
more surface
underneath-
area but less material, and then to
Yeah.
your south it's more material but less surface area.
yeah, but you'd be like, I mean, not to sound crude, but what if there's more junk in the trunk out there?
Right.
Denser material too.
Sure,
Like,
sure. So if it's like just using random numbers, if like 1,000 kilograms were behind you, but mostly underneath you, and then there's 1,000 kilograms in front of you, but it's very thin, but a lot of surface area, it would just be that offsetting amount of mass. In all
It's sort of
technicality, I'm not sure because you're adding that would be direction too, because it's not just left and right. There'd be depth versus no depth, so there would be directionality.
So is there a way in your mind where you could possibly have mass attracting mass on a flat Earth and it still look the way it does now?
So it's sort of, it's the principle behind mass attracting mass. I think I could accept for a flat Earth. It would be the implications afterwards that would fall apart for a flat Earth. But the principle, I don't see why it couldn't.
What implications?
Because it's just a source that's originating from the middle of an object, similar to magnetism. So we see if that source is originating from the middle, the most the shape of I'm going to cut up the phrase kind of, but the shape of least resistance would be a sphere. Because it's just that equal potential. It's just like any other magnet. If you were to throw like ferrous liquid over it, it's gonna lean towards spherical. It's not perfect, but that's the principle behind it. But the principle of mass attracting mass, there's no reason for that not to exist on a flat Earth. It's just the implications afterwards.
Well, this conversation kind of had branched from, the theodolites. We were talking about the plumb lines. Just to go back to that for a second, do you think it's possible? Because I was thinking this when we were talking about it. In terms of the theodolite, the ones that are electronic, do you trust those electronics to be accurate?
To a margin of error, yes.
Okay, so you don't think it's like you'll take something that you didn't design or don't fully know how it works as an accurate measurement, as an actual physical measurement of something?
I'll heed the experience of professionals claiming to use it all the time and producing legitimate architecture, legitimate bridges, roads, buildings. If they're saying that they're using this equipment to successfully build these things, then I'm cool with the equipment.
But those would be under very, very fairly small distances, right? I mean, I guess a bridge might be the one that would be the largest in terms of distance of those you mentioned.
Yeah, it just seems like it would. It just seems like it would be obvious if it weren't working as intended or as advertised. I feel like it would be obvious.
Well, the thing is, though, if it's the distance at which they're being used that changes the accuracy of those plumbs as to whether they're parallel or not, or what it's getting as plumb, I should say.
Well, plumb is easy. You could that's easy. The actual margin of errors that exist within the equipment is when you calculate distances. As far as shooting a horizontal plane, that extends out for infinite. But the margin of error exists with the calculated distances using these measurements. which is it. That's not what's being calculated here. But again, it'd be nice if someone like Rakia or Bev, who claim to use this equipment all the time, it'd be nice if they had counter evidence. I mean, genuinely, if I were a flat earther, I'd be asking them to do something like this. Plenty of lakes, especially Louisiana, plenty of lakes to do this.
I think that works multiple ways because you definitely know where to find them. A lot of those guys have very large social media footprints. It'd be kind of interesting to hear what they have to say. And then the other thing too is like that if you're trusting experts, I mean that does require, in my point of view, a lot of trust. So if there's things that are presented that would break that trust, would you consider that part of the decision-making matrix, or would you be able to compartmentalize these events?
No, of course. If there's evidence of fuckery, then I have to take fuckery seriously. Of course. But yeah, Bev and Rekia have opinions on this. I've shown it to Rekia many times. He's been shown it many times. We've had conversations. He has opinions, but what I'm specifically saying is, if measurements are provided, it would be nice to have counter evidence in the form of measurements. You know what I mean?
With these devices?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That's science. I provide a methodology. Here are the tools and equipment. This is how I set it up. This is the measurements that I got. Here, take all of the equipment, repeat what I did, and see if you come up with the same result, because maybe I fucked up along the way. Maybe I did something else. So take the exact same stuff that I used and, see what you get.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I can't speak for those people in particular or anything. I mean, I am not a surveyor professionally or anything, so I don't own this equipment and haven't worked with it directly myself. So obviously, I would have limited feedback to be able to fully say on it. However, what I would say for myself is that any device that I'm using, if I'm using it to measure something, I would have to know through and through the entire way that it's made, how it's made and how it works before just assuming that it does something.
Yeah, sure. And then that's the beauty about the link that I provided with Jesse's measurements, is that he does provide manuals to all the equipment that he uses. So it's one of those, it's not just here's a methodology, here's tools. It's here's the manuals to understand how these things are operated. I do understand them. And since I'm providing or not me personally, BioDual, I'm Jesse. I understand how these things are used, so I'm just going to give you the link as a reference so you can learn how, but I'm going to carry on with the measurement.
Yeah, I got you with that. Well, let me ask you this. In your understanding, in your understanding of the community, have you heard anyone who's using this exact equipment to measure planar surface of Earth? In your viewpoint of it,
There's someone could be. I haven't seen a total station or a theodolite with measurements for the purpose of measuring flat Earth, or perhaps measurements coming back as flat Earth. I haven't seen those. I won't say it hasn't happened or someone hasn't done it. I just haven't seen them.
I have not seen anyone who's taken one of the digital ones and gotten any planar readings. Yeah, for sure. Auto levels that are, some of the auto levels devices, which can be physical. Yes, people have definitely used those because, however, what I certainly would say about those is that at the distance at which they need to be used to measure the surface of the Earth, they're useless. They don't have any actual purpose they don't have any effectiveness in being able to measure that long of a distance with the physical leveling devices like an auto level.
They do. Like I said, if you were to measure if your purpose was to measure and calculate a distance, there's that margin of error that will come in. But this is strictly deviation from your horizontal, and that's
So
like
this
I said,
whole thing's based on non-parallel plumb lines, which you said could happen on a flat Earth.
On the stipulation that you've taken a step towards a model as well as accepting gravity. On those conditions, I'll throw away reciprocal zenith angles because of the
Yeah, so
possibility.
okay, with those, anything based off plumb lines being parallel, which is what we should see on a flat Earth, you're gonna just toss that.
On the condition that you have established a step forward to a model as well as accepting mass attracting mass. On those conditions, there is a possibility that they'll have the same interactions that we see. We can
Yeah, that's
investigate
fine.
more, but I won't be as fervent as I am now.
That's fine. It's just not the thing you're saying is not definitive because it could happen on a flat Earth, right?
If you're presenting a model in which the
All
ice
right.
wall is the end of the Earth, then and mass attracts mass, then yes, it's possible
So it's
you would have the
possible
same
for this to
interaction.
happen. Possible for this to happen on a flat Earth. So this doesn't decipher between either model. What you're saying here with these plumb lines.
You're not listening to the conditions that would
I
be
hear you.
required.
I hear you. Okay, I accept gravity, everything. So now plumb lines aren't parallel on a Earth, and now we have all your whole thing is not definitive because it could happen on either model, right?
In that specific version of a model, yes, you're correct. Now, what we would say is, look, we see past an ice wall. There's no edge. You're going to have to validate the edge now.
Okay, so but before we do all that and validate an edge and whatnot, thing you were saying about the plumb lines not being parallel and everything that's based on that, we can just toss that, right? Because that's not definitive at all.
With those specific stipulations, correct. Let's throw them out.
Sure, okay.
Now validate the edge.
Do you have anything without plumb line that's not based on the plumb lines being parallel?
No, yeah, that's
Undefinitive.
what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. I have evidence that the Earth doesn't end at the ice wall. I have evidence that the Earth keeps going because it's a continent. I have evidence that there is no edge. So now, under those conditions that you've specified, I'm throwing out reciprocal zenith angles, but now I'm bringing up the edge. You just need to validate the edge now.
The edge of flat Earth. So what? I don't know. Let me know when you're ready to go validate it, and we'll take a trip down. I don't know. We'll just keep going south or something. I don't know.
Right. So if we have no evidence for it, then we can't push forward with that model.
Well, we have no evidence that it ends or doesn't end. Well, let me know when you're ready to go validate it, and we can go do that. Until then, we're in the same boat of.
We do have evidence, though.
Who knows?
We do have evidence that
No, we don't.
technically it doesn't end. It just goes to the other side of a globe.
Oh yeah, the South Pole. Yeah.
The stars in the southern celestial pole, that entire star field, that would be evidence because you can see from multiple continents looking south. You can see one set of stars. We have pictures and videos from Antarctica with no evidence of an edge. There's no reason to think there is an edge.
Well, I mean, no one's saying the edge ends in Antarctica. Maybe some people do, but it could go past that for how many? What, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, millions of miles? We were talking earlier about infinite.
No, I know, but we've established conditions. We've established an edge, and by putting forth an edge, it's possible that plumb lines won't be parallel. But if you're going to invoke an infinite, now we're back to reciprocal zenith angles.
Now it could be infinite, but maybe there's just not as much mass per part, or there's more mass. Like this, the same thing would happen with an edge or without an edge if you just had the mass in the right spot.
Quite possibly, we just need evidence for that, Jeremy. You need a model.
Proof of the edge. So we don't need proof of the edge because we've just established that if it's infinite, which would have no edge, or it is finite, which it would have an edge, it's irrelevant because all you have to do is have the mass in the right spot. So this whole edge thing you're trying to take it to is I don't know, it's like a red herring or something.
It isn't, because it's very important, because if your position is it could be anything, then how can we move forward as far as the debate or a pursuit for knowledge? If your position is it could be anything, then there's no point in moving forward.
I know, I'm just trying to point out, you admit it could be some of these things, so there's nothing definitive about anything about plumb lines being parallel that revolves around that.
It is definitive because it's I think this is a common problem, is that I'm not putting all of my eggs in one basket with reciprocal zenith angles. It's a conglomerate of evidences and different methodologies that comport to one thing. It's like saying I have 25 different types of measurements, and they point to this one thing. This one measurement could point to these 5 things, but because I'm using these 30 pieces of evidences, they all point in one direction. That's what I'm going to move forward with.
Here, I've got little musings going on here. So, what about this one, right? What if it's something that no one knows? Like it could be infinite, but also an edge. Because there would be sort of like a distant, almost like they say with gas pressure gradient. What if there's a mass pressure gradient that extends out for an infinity? But you're not even able to detect that because of the way human senses work. It just appears to be an open space.
Right, sure. If it's possibly a thing that we can't detect and measure, then it would be irresponsible to subscribe to that. I leave it open to the possibility. I would just need evidence.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It might not be perceivable at a human level. You're not able. Like you could walk into a room and the temperature could be 1 degree off, or what they say it is. But is it fine tuned enough? You'd have to have some other detection device that is going to pick up something like gravity, because gravity in and of itself is so weak that all these other forces go first. They get the first of the pecking order.
When they're a similar size, sure. I understand what you're saying, but again, if the position that you exist on is, what if there's this thing that we have an inability to detect or measure, then my response is, I can't subscribe to that until we can take measurements or interact with it or observe it.
Great. That sounds like a very good position to take. Absolutely.
That sounded condescending, but I agree with the
No,
words.
it's surprising to hear someone of your opinion state that that if you can't actually interact with it and measure it, then you aren't going to go ahead and base things off of it. That makes perfect sense. That's a very good position to take. Normally, you guys don't say things that are that logical.
That's not what he said, though.
That is pretty much what he said.
That's almost word for word exactly what he said. Yes.
He did.
Sort
Now,
of,
he
though.
said,
Yeah,
evidence.
Lane, don't ruin it. It's a great baseline for positive communication. Now,
Having evidence for something is not necessarily interacting with it, right?
but
No.
trying to preface it out would make it seem counterintuitive right now.
There's plenty of ways to account for something without directly manipulating or touching or observing, and forces would be the best way to do that. If we were totally ignorant towards magnetism, something that we agree on today, but if we were totally ignorant about that, we could see the movement of something despite nothing causing it, apparently causing it, but we see a movement. We can't directly touch magnetism, but we see its interaction, and we have to account for it somehow. So we can do other experiments and we can investigate it further, but in that moment, we have no tangible evidence.
Do you think you have? Do you feel like you have tangible evidence of outer space?
Tangible. We'd have to define that, but I guess probably not. I think. I mean, NASA does, but as far as what I would bring to the table here, it would be observations that we can all make. So I guess in that way, it's not tangible because it's observations.
Can you?
But as a human race, we do have tangible evidence.
Okay. Well, at the moment, I'm just talking about you. So can you?
Right.
So you're agreeing it's not tangible to you. Can you test it?
A lot of things within space. Yeah. You can test in a way. Yeah.
Well,
you can test in a way of orbital mechanics. That'd be one way in which you can monitor something for, let's say, 3 months, and then based on that, you can make predictable calculations. You can incorporate gravity, you can incorporate orbital mechanics, and then you can incorporate a globe Earth and say, at this location, this latitude, longitude, I have to be at a declination of this. I expect Mercury to be here where my telescope was pointing. That'd be one way to test things.
Here, I got one for you that doubles down on this, and actually kind of will agree with scientific testing using natural man-made. So I had this is when Tesla shot their Starman, and I was saying I consider that an experiment. Let's see if the Starman will follow Kepler's laws. And I'm like, can you show me here? Like this orbital mechanics stuff. Can you hand jam it out and point in the general direction which way Starman is? And apparently it can't be done. It's just out there somewhere, and no one. There's a website that kind of tells you its general direction, which that Monty Python joke.
Do you remember when they said? Remember when they said it was going to go to Jupiter?
Yeah, there's all these crazy predictions. I'm like, if so it's kind of interesting. Like Indio talked about this. Like if you throw a ball and use machine learning, the ball will eventually predict where, or the machine will predict where the ball will land, just by force prediction alone. But yet somehow Starman is just out there, just doing its thing, but no one can predict where it is, or even point into a general direction. Like somewhere out this way, it's doing something.
Yeah, that actually links in right with what I was about to say, which is that I was going to say how there's the idea that there's like three forms of knowledge. I was going to ask Bio if you would agree with this or not as well. The first form is primary. So that would be primary knowledge, something that you yourself have arrived to, whether it's through the physical world or even like the metaphysical, spiritual, emotional world as well. I think there's, in terms of that primary knowledge of what your emotions are, you feel love, something like that. And then there's secondary, which is through someone else or through proxy. It's through some form of proxy. Could be a government proxy, could be another person, could be the internet, could be anything like that. It's just secondary knowledge. And then the third one is tertiary, which would be, from the secondary to the tertiary. So now you have a proxy and a third party involved on that level. So then you would have tertiary. Perhaps there's even going up 4, 5, 6. You could even go more layers as well. So it's interesting to think about what knowledge do we have? Let's say about the Earth. Each of us in this room, what do we have about it that's primary, that's verified through yourself, and then how much of it is secondary or tertiary? And I would go as far as to say that when it comes to the globe Earth, almost all of it is secondary and tertiary.
How much? Here, I'll give you my honest assessment. I'd say most of my knowledge is secondary. I have some primary, as you know, with my experiment, whatever. But I want to ask you as well. How much of the flat Earth is primary versus secondary for you?
That's a good point.
Because I would predict, I'd predict at least 95% would be secondary.
No, not for me. I would say a lot more is primary than that, for sure. But the thing is, I haven't been to every part of the Earth, so just on that alone.
And are you delineating between evidence for a flat Earth versus evidence of it's not a ball? Because those are actually two different categories. The evidence of it is a flat Earth would be almost 100% your own experience, because you walk outside. Whenever you walk outside, that's what you experience is an Earth that is flat. So that would be almost entirely primary. Now,
in your opinion, though,
it's not a spinning ball. That might be more secondary, because it's these other people sometimes doing experiments or whatever, or pointing out this is doing this and it should be doing this if it is a ball, so therefore it's not a ball, that kind of stuff. But the actual category of it is a flat Earth evidence, that would be almost 100% primary. You walk outside, that's exactly what you experience is a flat Earth.
In your opinion, because I would obviously disagree that I experience what I would expect on a globe Earth. So in that way, if you want a flat earther to have be granted mostly primary for that reason, you would have to grant it to a glober, because I also go outside, but I experience the globe.
No, you don't. You don't ever correct for the globe in anything that you do in life.
No, I experience the globe. I see a crisp horizon. I see half the sun at a sunset and sunrise. I see the changing of the stars in the sky. I see the sun's movement. No. You don't get to tell me what I interpret reality as. You do not have that power.
We're not talking about interpretation. If we were talking about interpretation, then the question wouldn't matter at all. I thought we weren't talking about interpretation. I thought we were talking about experience.
Wait,
You
hold
don't
on. Okay,
adjust your
okay.
daily
Then let me
life for the
rephrase. Let me
globe.
rephrase. Then you don't get to tell me what my experience is. How
I'm
about
not trying to tell you what your experience is either.
that? You just did. You said I said that I experience a globe when I go outside, and you said no, you don't. You experience it as a flat. You don't get to dictate
No,
what
no.
my experience is.
I think maybe you misheard what I said. You don't adjust your life for the globe. You don't.
I don't adjust it for a flat Earth.
Okay.
Okay.
Real quick,
So
before
there we
this
go.
hour's up, let me just put forward that thing with the lights and the line. I heard you asking about that earlier. I was busy. That one seems like it's pretty tricky to do, but the idea was to establish level, which the Globers say is curving, and we say is flat. So we establish level over a distance. I don't know how long, a couple miles or something. Then you get lights in every 100 feet or 100 meters or eighth of a mile or something. You put a light, and you reverse the globe math. So you have a light at a specific height above your level, right at the beginning, and then 1 mile later there would be another light 8 inches above level, right? And you can have them intermittently in between, at the appropriate height, just reversing the Earth, how much
I see
drop
what you're
there would
saying.
be. Yeah, so you reverse how much drop there would be. Now in the globe model, that is a straight line. The line
That
we
would be
just made with these
your
lights.
yeah. If you were to connect them all together, it'd be a straight line. But
Yeah,
yeah,
you have a row of straight lights.
instead of using like those electric towers that we see, move vertically dropping, what you're saying is those towers would be different heights, and because given a globe, those towers would be a straight line in your eye level. Um, blah blah blah.
Yeah, but on a flat Earth, those lights would be curving up towards the end. Now there's some problems
Right,
with this.
right.
This has it's very tricky to try to even do this. I don't know. I was working on it for a couple days, but if anyone could add anything to it, or a way to do it, we thought about curving the lights because you're gonna have some drop from perspective. Because if you try to take an orthographic or a side-on view of this, you're gonna have some lights farther away from you than the middle lights. You're also gonna have a different amount of refraction in between you than the middle lights. Whereas if you had them curving around you like in a semicircle kind of thing, then you could get them all the same distance. But you need to get enough of it in like one camera shot or something. I don't know. It's very tricky to try.
I'm gonna draw a picture. I know what you're talking about. I'll draw a picture.
Yeah, it's tricky though to try to. It sounds good like theoretically, but then you have to take a picture of it, and now you're counting pixels. How much is the line on the same pixel line, and depending on how good your camera is and how many pixels it has, and how far you are away from the lights, you don't you wouldn't see that much of a pixel change. So it's tough. Not easy. Nothing's easy. I mean, if anyone has any ideas on how to do like a definitive measurement, and that's optical. Half my people don't even like that idea because it's still optical.
It's still a good theory. It's just applying it to reality and doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea of a way to do it. I think that could be done with a force the line as well, like a force the line type setup, to be able to change the heights of the lights in a way that is defined, or the positions of some type of marker. It doesn't even have to be a light, to then see how that tracks along the actual Earth surface or water, the surface of water, standing water.
I mean, that one. I feel like that was good though because that's how we get. It's too hard to make a straight line out from scratch. But if you have the globe math, that should be a straight line according to the globe. Like I've always felt like there was a usefulness in this chord thing. You know what I mean? The chord of
Here,
a
like
sphere.
this, Jeremy. When you're looking straight on to, let's say, four posts, the top of them are going to form this straight line. And then if you look at orthographically, then you'll see that each one is a longer length as it gets away from the observer.
Yeah.
Obviously with lights too, but yeah.
And that's essentially how a measuring rod and auto level works. It's that same type of concept in terms of getting a measurement. Of course, I don't think it would be curving, but I'm just saying that that's how you verify an auto level over distance is that it's level. It would be like the one on the top.
So I mean, yeah, if anyone has something definitive. Like if there was a piece of definitive evidence out there, we wouldn't even be here talking about this right now. We'd just be like, yo, here it is. There's no doubt. Like if you told me water didn't exist, you know, if there was a debate on if water exists or not, that ain't gonna last, right? That debate, because it's definitive. Water exists.
Exactly. I don't even think you could create a large community of people debating about whether water exists or not. Like
Yeah,
that would be because that's what some people think when they say the term flat earth. That's what they think flat earth is it's essentially a bunch of people into something that's completely and totally false and a whole bunch of other people that are following it as well in this like massive process that's been going on, you know, for really like the last 7 years, very solidly. And it was, of course, even roaring before that in different ways as well. But it never really went away entirely. But especially back in like the 1920s, it was basically after World War II that they really got the globe thing fully saturated. But
Jeremy, I'm trying to remember. I think someone did a measurement like this on either on a lake or an ice lake where they had a number of flags set up at a distance.
Yeah, but did they take a side-on view from it, though? That's the key to it. We know what happens when you look head-on. There's refraction happening. Shit's going up, going down. You know, you need to take a side-on view from this so that you eliminate the possibility of it's an atmospheric effect, and you're looking at the same distance, same refraction to all the lights. You know what I'm saying?
No, because your orthographic view and your observer view, those are going to be completely different distances to every single marker.
I know, and the side-on and the orthographic view, you're the same distance from all the lights. Remember how I said set it up in like a semicircle or a circle kind of thing around you? So you get them the same, you get all the lights the same distance from you.
Oh,
from a
sure,
center point.
sure. If you're the midpoint of this circle, and on the edge of this circle there are a number of markers. Sure, no, I understand that, but I don't see the purpose of that. If let's say that's half a mile, but for the observer, some fucking elsewhere, the first marker is half mile, but the last marker is a mile and a half. How are you going to compare the middle of the circle seeing half a mile and then the observer 1.5 miles? I don't think there's a comparison there for observation.
No, you get it. So all the lights are in one camera shot, right? And take a picture.
No, I get that. What I'm saying is the purpose of doing that. I don't see a purpose to the comparison.
Because on a flat Earth side on, that the line is not going to be a horizontal line. It's going to be curving up at a rapid rate. You know what I'm saying? But
when you're directly looking at all of them, yeah.
Yeah, when you're looking at all of them on a globe, it would be a horizontal line. So it's you know.
Yeah,
and
so we're not even talking about the orthographic view then.
Why? No, that's what you got to do.
No, because if you're at the middle of a circle on a globe and you have, let's say, 4 markers at random points on the circle at half a mile, all of them are half a mile from you. That's your drop. That's each one of them has the same drop of half a mile. They're not going to be horizontal due to Earth curve. They're going to be at different heights because they are different heights. They're at the same distance from you.
No, you have a level surface, right? In this half circle, you have a level surface. Then you set up the lights accordingly, reverse Earth curve, and you look at it, and they're the height Earth curve should be they're the height they should be to make a straight horizontal line on the globe. What's the problem?
Yeah, and I'm talking about the orthographic view.
That's what I'm talking about.
You wouldn't be able if you're describing the orthographic view as you're the center of a circle and there's markers at the edge of this circle. They're all half a mile away. They're not going to form a straight line to the tops of each other.
Why? They're the same. They're the exact height you would put something if you wanted to form a straight line on a globe.
Right. If you're looking dead on, because you're changing. Okay. At 1 mile, the tower needs to be 8 inches high, just for example, because we're doing the reverse globe. And then at 2 miles, it has to be 64 inches. So those are the heights of your towers. Now you have this 8-inch object and a 64-inch object. If you do it orthographically, where they're both half a mile from you, they're both experiencing, let's say, 4 inches of drop. So you're going to see 4 inches of the 8-inch one, and you're going to see 60 inches of. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. That's why I think the orthographic view doesn't matter.
However you do it, do it, you set up the orthographic, because obviously we know what happens when you look head on down a string of lights. There's some
Right.
optical effect that gives you this apparent drop. That's why you need to do an orthographic view somehow of these lights to where it should be a straight line on a, we know what a straight line would be according to the globe map.
We wouldn't have to do orthographic though. We would do it dead on because we would want to line them up so that way each marker is a different distance away.
We already know what happens when you look head on. I just said that. We know that there's this optical drop that you guys are mistaking for Earth curve. We already know what happens. There's no point in doing it head on. If we have to do it head on, then forget it. Like it's worthless.
I mean that would be the way to do it. But this orthographic view, I think you just realized the error of it.
Oh, making a half circle, yeah. Well, I mean, my initial idea, that was Kosho's idea to make the half circle. My idea was just make a straight row of lights.
Right, but then you'd have to calculate the each of the differences because it would be if you're looking at it dead on and let's say it's half-mile increments. If you're looking orthographically, they're not going to be the same increment from you. So they're still going to be half a mile from each other. But if you're looking at an angle, the first one may be half a mile from you. The next one may be 0.7 of a mile from you. The next one might be 1.1 miles away from you. Those would be separate calculations.
It would still form a line, though, right?
In respect to each other, sure, if you're looking dead on.
I think
But
that's
the
what you're saying to
relationship,
me, right?
the relationship of the drop though would be different because if you're looking dead on and they're half-mile increments, those are easy calculations of yes, Earth curve at half mile, 1 mile, 1.5. But if you're orthographic, they're not going to be they're not going to be the same increments from you at that location. It may be half a mile between the first and second, but between the second and third, maybe 0.4 of a mile from your position. So now you fuck it up kind of.
What would you do to get some kind of definitive measurement that would appease us? I know you think there already is, but what do you think would appease us? What we could do?
Oh, I don't think anything would, to be honest. And it's not. I'm not trying to jab at you, and it may be a little funny, but I honestly don't. I don't think anything will.
Well,
Really,
I
Bob?
beg to differ.
Yeah, I mean,
No, that's why I support. That's why I support these ideas that you guys come up with. I 100% support flat earthers going out and do something because I think what's going to be more effective is boots on the ground, your eyes and your hands on something, because then you can't really refute yourself. You guys can you guys can pretend to refute us when we present evidence and there these issues, but I don't think you can refute yourself if you go out and do it. That's why I support every idea that you guys have.
Ditto.
I'll give my honest assessment where I think problems exist, but I will never ever tell you not to do something. I wish you guys would do more.
Did White's word ever come on? Because he had a decent one that could have some difficulty, executing. But the thing of his is pretty solid.
I'm gonna go smoke. I'll be right back.
All right, White, you there? What did he change his name? The time isn't real.
yeah. I think he said earlier he was not able to be on voice, but yeah, if you're listening, yeah, if you end up being able to, because I would love for him to present. Because I feel like we did a lot of good work on that. There was a lot of additional components that, at least in my mind, it was like a lot of advancement in terms of my understanding of his test. Because I remember it back when he presented it on Brandon's, and I remember it back then, but I don't know that. Well, I think he's also up. There's been some also updates as well, just in terms of the material that he now has, and then we were hashing it out. We were hashing it out with so much depth that because that whole concept of, essentially what it is. I'll just share what it is, and of course, White's can. No, you know what? He, as far as I know, he came up with this. He invented this. So actually, I think just out of respect for him, I think we'll just wait to have him present it at some point. But yeah, it's a good one. I think that one is that's in one of the. There's a certain number, in my viewpoint. There are certain physical measurements of Earth that are going to essentially end the entire globe deception. So when these measurements are fully done by enough people around the world, there won't be a way at that point to deny that the Earth is not a planar surface. I guess I won't say stationary because that you could get some other theory that it's doing something else or something. If you know, because if you want to go on a larger scale and say something or some other concept, but the actual physical movement of it, or sorry, the physical measurement of it will be verified, and that is how this shift in cosmology from, in my opinion, this globe deception through all this time to what the Earth actually is and what it always was, going back to our ancient ancestors, but ultimately just being a plane of existence, that will be verified. And so there's certain physical tests, and several of them that will be done around the world, that are going to be needed to sort of reach the tipping point to where enough people will be able to know at that point, professionals all around the world, just everybody. So, and White's test, like the one that he invented, as far as I know, invented it in terms of the concept, is one of them. So yeah, I think his can be very definitive. Might want to have. I think it's good to have additional ones as well, though, to corroborate. But yeah, that one is like one of the. It's a major note, instead of a minor note, like in music, like majors and minors. Well, I'm just saying it's one of the core measurements.
Yeah, for whatever reason, this comes to mind that you do all these experiments and say you were to prove that what I say planet Earth is flat, I would still be me and you would still be you, or vice versa. We would still be the same people that we are. And I see so much hatred within the community against one another that I would really like to see some of that dissipate and people get along a little better,
That's predicted though, so that's like by my version of flat Earth. The idea of the Karen, right, where people are worked up by what other people think, and it wouldn't change anything because it would just move on to a different issue, like veganism or some religious-based thing, or evolution. Pineapple on pizza.
Okay.
Well, no, I hear the point you're saying, Howard, for sure. And that goes deeper into like who we are as people. I mean, I think that who we are transcends our viewpoints on things, even if it, something as large as the Earth. But how do you think it would change you though, Howard? Would it like let's say that I had right now, Howard, let's say that I had 5 ways of measuring the Earth that were all set up at demonstration sites that were all around the world. And when I say me, I'm not saying me personally. I'm just saying if this was available, and that you could travel to all the continents that you're aware of. Let's just leave extra land out of it. You could go to all the continents you're aware of, and on multiple positions on those continents, you could go to these sites and actually verify yourself that there's no, that it's not curving. There's no curvature. If just on that alone, what would it change? Because you're saying it wouldn't change. Like I would still be me, you would still be you. I agree. But then the question is, what would it actually change?
Wow, who knows, man? I would definitely just continue on my path, the career that I'm doing and the living that I'm making. I really don't. I mean, because it is what it is, regardless, So I don't know. I don't know.
It would literally change your whole mind, though, because in your mind you have a model of Earth in your mind, right? And
Oh yeah,
nobody's model is the same. You have a different model than I do, but at the base of it, they all had us sitting on a globe, right? So your whole foundation of reality would change.
yeah. Yeah, I
Well,
think Pete Shea and I were talking, and I think my response, if I were to find out, that I would eat my hat, and it's a significant degree of certainty that I've got, and what my opinion of the shape of the Earth is, that if I were proved wrong, yeah, I would eat my hat.
That wouldn't be required from my point of view. I would just say, like, would you be open to more identities going forward? Like, maybe it's okay for the minority to be to live their experiences. Even more so if your claim partially includes that this minority isn't really relevant in any sort of sphere of influence that you deem like critical for society.
Well, here's an idea. I just thought about this, which I may have thought about before, but just popped in my mind. I would say this. It's not wrong to be wrong. Meaning, if you're incorrect about something, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, if you know what I mean. So, yes, you're wrong. So, in that way, yes, there's something wrong with that, or in that sense. But on another sense, I would say there's like just when it comes to being a human, being who we are, whether you think we're a soul or an identity, a personality, whatever it is, like the idea that it's okay to be incorrect. So, even if you are completely incorrect, I could still, from my own perspective, I have just as much love, compassion, respect for another person that I give infinitely to everyone as much as I'm able, to where that wouldn't change that. It wouldn't alter that in any way.
Just to add to that real quickly, it's also okay to let someone else be incorrect. You guys can disagree on something, and both of you go off and live happy, fulfilled, content lives and never discuss that particular thing ever again, and both be happy with your lives. Not everything has to be hashed out right then and there, or ever even. It's okay to let someone else just be incorrect about some things.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful practice, I feel spiritually, to like for myself to just truly supporting other people to be who they are in their exact process. Like, because that can go so deep. Like, it made me think when you said that, Bob, about like even in a relationship, let's say like a marriage or a romantic relationship, just that idea, because usually it's one partner is trying to control the other, or the other's trying to control them, and there's often tension or whatever it may be. But just that like practice of somehow just like completely letting someone else be who they are. Of course, there's a challenge to that, because let's say you're a woman and the man's beating you. Well, you can't really say, "Oh, I'm just going to let him be who he is," and then all of a sudden he's punching you every day, and so obviously there's certain like boundaries and limits to that. But at the same time, I think it's just a very beneficial practice in life in general, is to kind of like that concept of live and let live, think and let think.
Right, it comes back to those basic rights that we have as humans, like the right to live peaceably. Well, that covers that thing that you're talking about, where someone is just hitting somebody else. That already covers that. So that's taken care of. Once you breach that right to live peaceably, well, now you've done something else. So that part already doesn't count underneath that.
It's really like that you do you, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
And Simon Dan apparently says you do you all the time. So I thought that was interesting. I found that out today. So there's
I know you
point of peaceful communication. I could be like, hey, check this out. If I ever talk to him, I'd be like, I'm fond of saying you do you also.
Well, here's why that's a little bit different in my mind, though, is that if you allow someone to just totally be who they are, like you're just in your own like Zen, you're in your own meditative state, as it were, in a sense, and just totally at peace with whatever that person's doing. But I agree with what Bob said. If that person starts, disrupting the peace in an extreme way, or abusing you, or physically, hitting you, yes, of course, something would have to be done in that case. But the thing about what you were saying, Crit, like the you do you, the thing about that is that is an instruction. Like you're telling someone they have to do themselves. So it does get to be where like people don't really want to be told what to do, and it could be seen as controlling in a sense, because you're demanding that they do something rather than just letting them do themselves, as it were, or be themselves.
Like a microaggression in a way?
Yeah, it's a passive aggressive kind of. Well, I haven't really run into that term that much in my life, but I have had some people in my life. I'm thinking of one or two friends who used to say that one commonly, but that's the only kind of interaction I've had with it. And when they did it, it was not really in like an argument environment. But anyways, yeah. So I have heard that statement, but yeah, it seems, well, like I said, because you're instructing someone else to do something. So by definition, if that's the case, then it could be interlaced as like a controlling effort rather than a just a peaceful kind of harmony energy between, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you like preface it, say like, do what's best for you, and I will do what's best for me, and then everyone's happy.
I guess one of the ways I do that is I say terms like "I hear you" a lot. Like I'm just like "I hear you." Yep. I do a lot of just receiving in that sense. What?
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah. Or I see you.
Well, that's a powerful thing too. Like the concept of being seen. There's actually like in workshops and stuff. I mean, this might sound kind of um, maybe beyond what maybe average people, or not average people, but you know what I mean, like the mainstream of the world has done. But have you ever, like, there's like practices where you can do where you actually like look into someone else's eyes and then they look at you. So you kind of sit like cross-legged, basically, maybe 3 feet in front of each other, and then you just sit there and look at each other. Look into each other's eyes. It's like soul gazing. You essentially are soul gazing into each other's souls as well, but into each other's eyes. And it's very powerful. I mean, of course, like if people want to, if they like laugh or they make faces, then it goes off the rails. But if you just keep it where you're actually just like in like a Zen state, like more of a meditative state when you're doing it, it's really fascinating because like what I've noticed is like once their face, like the little changes in their face, you start to notice in a really strong way, like the subtleties. But anyways, it just made me think of that because you were saying like being seen. And yeah, I think that's very powerful because at the end of the day, we all want to be received in some way. I mean, I would even say that when we came out of the birth canal, we were received by other humans in that sense. So it's like it's in our very like birth to be heard or to be received or to be understood, or which is part of the whole kind of social connection of people.
It's like when I took that college class last semester, there was an orientation, and they talked about recognizing all identities. That inside the classroom is a safe space, and that should be imitated here because safe spaces are built on science for learning. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If someone doesn't feel physically or psychologically safe, it's hard for them to learn anything because those first needs aren't being met.
Exactly. That's very well said.
There's a difference though between you determining for yourself to not attempt to control somebody else and you determining that you are going to control someone else into not controlling or acting on someone else. There's a difference there. You can have a safe space in that each person is allowed to keep to themselves. That's different than a safe space where you say, you will do it this way because I think that's the safest way.
Well, that's interesting.
I mean, one is freedom and one is tyranny, by the way. That's the difference there. One is freedom and one is tyranny. One is freedom to you let someone else live peaceably and you live peaceably and don't bother each other. The other one is tyranny of top down. One person decides this is the safe way and you'll do it this way or else. That's the two different ways there.
Well, let me ask you this. So when it comes to like, let's say this server, this actual Discord, platform, as it were. So, because what you described there, like, so if there's server guidelines here, then how does that work? Because, okay, I'll say this. If we could all just be on this server and all be peaceably all good, yeah, we wouldn't need any, warnings or account restrictions or any of that stuff. We wouldn't even need it because we'd all just be chilling. But then if we don't have the guidelines like that, as you know, Bob, especially in today's world, it becomes, very, very toxic and constant to where because almost like what Crit just said, like if you feel psychologically or emotionally like threatened or being attacked, it's going to be very hard to like open up or have a discussion or even to learn or to share research with other people. It's going to completely, block that. So how does that play into it? Yeah.
The way that works, that comes down to then context is important, basically. So just like if you have a piece of property that is yours, you make the rules on that piece of property. If someone comes onto the property and isn't following the rules, that's the same as them not living peaceably with you. They're not allowing you to live peaceably.
There you go. Yep.
Okay. So now they violated your right to live peaceably by not following the rules in the area that is yours. So Discord, they own Discord. They make the rules for Discord. Underneath that, they have granted others like you. I think you're the owner of this server. the right to have this server. So you would make the rules here. If somebody doesn't like the rules in this space, they can go make their own space if they want to, and that one can be theirs. But in the context of living life, well, we don't own other people's lives. So we don't get to make those rules for the other person. That's where it comes down to letting someone else live peaceably.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great point. It just makes me think about, well, at what point do any rules become constrictive or toxic? And of course, in today's world, all the quarantining and all the additional mandates, I mean, it's all going on. But like, okay, I understand what you're saying. Like, let's say in my house, if you come in my house, I can understand, like, let's say, some people have the rule of taking your shoes off, okay, so you take your shoes off. So that's one thing, but you're coming into my house, and you don't have to come into my house. You could be in your own house or go somewhere else. But at what point does it also get to where, and like you mentioned with this particular server, like, yeah, this is one server. But what about when it comes to, like, what I'm saying is that this is just one server, so people can choose to be here or not, and it's obviously it's a social media type thing in that way. But what about, like, on the next level when it gets to governments and things, because that's where it gets. And I don't know if we want to branch off into that whole topic, but it's just like, because we can't live peaceably on the land, right? That's the bottom line. If I could just have land and live on it and not have to pay taxes, grow my own food, just chill out, then this whole situation would be different, because then we could just live on the earth peaceably. But we're not able to, because we live inside the system in that way. So yeah, it's just
that's one of the, like, underpinning problems of our current state of society, though. Like, that's a broader problem that, yes, it like a lot of people maybe don't think about it, but it underpins a large portion, if not the entirety of our society, that government has decided that all of the land is essentially owned, and you don't get to just have some. That's not the way it works for them. Okay, that I agree. I think that is an issue. I don't think that the government should be doing that particular thing, and I think that needs to change. But that's not. It comes down to, what does the government then have the right to do as far as breaching your right to live peaceably? I think that right now our government has too much power and breaches our right to live peaceably. And it seems like they're trying to do even more than what they already do. It's not necessarily in an egregious fashion in the way that you would imagine, like, starts a civil war or something, because they don't seem to be coming to people's houses with guns yet or anything like that. Okay. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. But when you're talking about something like Discord or a business, or you're going to be an employee for someone, it's the freedom of association. You go in and you say, I'll work here for this much. Oh, I don't like your rules. Well, you're free to say, I'm not going to associate with your business. Never mind. I'll go somewhere else. Or with the Discord, like you said, they can be here or not be here. Freedom of association. They either want to associate with you and your rules, or they don't want to associate with you and your rules. And that's fine. They can go somewhere else and make their own rules, and have people who want to associate with them do so. But we shouldn't try to stop them from doing that.
Right. Well, and that's where this, and not to even, it's funny I'm bringing this up, not to even bring it in, but in terms of the injection process going on right now, it's getting to that point too, because talk about live peaceably, like, they're making it to where people can't live peaceably in their bodies now without having to be injected, so that's where it's starting to get dicey in terms of that. And I'm not trying to take it into a whole discussion of the jab and all that stuff, but it just, that's what's being encroached upon, which is kind of the first time in my life I've ever seen anything like this happen. I mean, I was born in 81, so, I obviously saw the 80s, 90s and all of that. But in terms of what's going on now, to where, like, the idea of living peaceably in the 80s and 90s, is pretty doable. You can have your house, do your thing. Of course, there's laws and everything, but you could. But nowadays, the landscape is changing, or at least attempting to be changed into a direction of these controller people.
You will own nothing, and you will like it.
Yeah, but I think maybe what's going to happen is they're going to concentrate those within, like, certain regions, and perhaps those of us that don't want to be in their regions will be able to be on the land free, like outside of it. That's
Yeah,
what
underground. Underground. You ever see Demolition Man? You know how the three
Maybe.
seashells work?
Matrix. Everybody else, you can keep your blue pills. We'll take the red ones and go live in the sewers.
I don't know about underground though. I gotta have to be by the sun. I love sunlight too much.
Maybe not.
Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion just in terms of all this. Yeah, how it all plays out. Yeah, I mean, I think the situation, there's definitely a shift in the system that has happened these last 2 years, I think. But I'm actually hopeful overall. I think there's going to be more expansion coming out of this. I'll mention too, just because it's been on my mind. I've mentioned it a couple times over the last week or two, but and not to take into an entire direction of this, but I will just mention this one thing, which is the luminary, or as people call them, planets of Saturn and Pluto. They have been in what's called a conjunction, which is when they're right next to each other in the sky, or they're basically in the same part of the sky. So, like, that's what happens in a new moon, where the sun and moon are right in the same part of the sky. So this Saturn Pluto has been aligned for essentially the last 2 years, two to 2.5 years. We've been in a Saturn Pluto conjunction, and of course, everything that's happened these last 2 years has been completely fitting to what those archetypally represent, especially a conjunction of those two representing. But what I was going to say about it is that we're moving out of it now. It's reached the 15-degree point, which is when these like when we've analyzed this statistically through history, about a 15-degree orb for these larger cycles seems to be the most accurate as to when the phenomenon is most active. So we're reaching the end of it. So it's like it's gotten to 15 degrees. So from here it goes up. It goes 16, 17, 18. And once it gets to 20 or 30, it's really not in range at all. So we're coming out of this whole cycle. So I think there will be some interesting kind of expansions and growth moving into 2022 that we didn't see in 2021.
Hey Gio, what do we expect to see? I don't know anything about this. I apologize.
Well, essentially, in a nutshell, each of these wandering stars, planets, luminaries, they're in their own cycles. So imagine like the hands of a clock. If you then, instead of having 2 hands, let's say you had 10 hands of the clock, and they're all moving at their own speeds. That's essentially what's happening with Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, etc. Those are all moving just like different speeds, like the hands of a clock. And so as they're all moving in their different speeds, they create geometric alignments to each other throughout time, uniquely. It's always unique because they're all moving at their different frequencies. So you get these different alignments of them. And then when they become aligned in the very potent positions, that's when the phenomenon is very strongly saturated and colored within humanity at that time. If we're talking about these larger cycles, and so we're moving out of the Saturn Pluto, but like you said, like what's coming in 22. But there's a bunch of other things that come into alignment. Well, as that one ends, other ones begin.
What, even with that one, I'm not going to ask you to predict, but post-dict. What are some of the things that happen because of the alignment of Pluto and Saturn, you said?
Yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah. What, like, can you point at something and say this is, something we would expect because of this alignment, or this makes sense because of this alignment?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Well, yep, that's a great point. And that's a lot of what I do in this work and what we do in terms of this, because essentially my understanding of it, just to kind of summarize it in this way, each of these, I'll just call them planets since a lot of people think of them as that. So each of these planets, even though I prefer the term luminary, but anyways, each one is essentially its own archetype. And an archetype is something that it has certain similarities, but it expresses itself in a bunch of different ways. So one example of an archetype is like mother. So we all have our own mothers, and our mothers are all unique. My mother's different than yours, different than yours. However, there is some kind of a characteristic of mother that is universal. Often they're very caring, supportive, nourishing. I mean, there's all the things that mothers, are, and that is universal in that sense. So when these principles come together, when it comes to like the archetype of Saturn or the archetype of Pluto or something like that, Saturn expresses itself in a lot of different ways, positive and negative. And then Pluto can express itself in positive and negative ways. And then when they come together, you can't really predict exactly what is going to happen concretely in the world, like a concrete event, but you can predict it archetypally. So essentially, we all knew that, like all those of us that are involved in this and are aware of the positions of these, we all knew that the Saturn-Pluto was coming in before essentially this pandemic thing hit. We all knew that it was coming in what's called into orb, so within 15 degrees. So we knew that that was happening, but we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And then once we saw what happened, it's incredibly clear to see this is how it expressed itself. So it is predictive archetypally. You can know which ones will be aligned, but you can't necessarily predict the concrete future with it.
Can you point at something that happened and say, this is because of these archetypes in alignment? I'm still confused on what the archetype for Pluto is. I get what a mother archetype is, and I understand my mom doesn't qualify tracking, but what is Pluto's?
Yep. Well, so are you aware of anything about Pluto, or would you just be starting from the beginning with it?
I know Pluto is a frozen piece of rock and ice, but beyond that, no.
I got you. I'm actually pulling up. I'm just since you mentioned it, I will pull it up and just read because essentially, I'm just going to read someone else's description of it. I could describe it myself as well, but just since you brought it up, I'm going to read his because it's incredibly well written. So this is from someone named Richard Tarnas. So here, I'll read what he says here. Okay, Pluto, the archetype of primordial energy, the universal life force which impels all evolution and transformation. Pluto represents the principle of power itself, of elemental force, of primal libido and aggression. It is essentially identical to Freud's notion of the id. It is the Dionysian energy of life, the serpent power, the kundalini. It compels, empowers, overwhelms, transforms. It destroys and resurrects. Pluto governs the instincts of the forces of nature. It rules the biological processes of birth, sex, and death. And at its deepest level, it involves the mystery of death and rebirth. There's actually more. I mean, I could continue, but that's
No. That helps. I'm very familiar with the concept of the id. Could you point at something in the last couple of years that you would say epitomize the id and how Pluto's effect on it?
So when it comes to the last 2 years, what I would say is this. So that's a little bit about Pluto, but the way I would also describe Pluto is it tends to, in a very simplistic way, in terms of in these alignments, it tends to impel and drive the other principle that it's touching with a lot of intensity. Like it's a driving, impelling. That's why it's all about like upheaval and decay and regeneration. So it's very intense. It's just intense. It intensifies things. That's why Scorpios, for example, people say Scorpios are such intense people. Well, actually Scorpio is what's called ruled by Pluto. It means Scorpio's connected directly to Pluto in a sense, which, but anyway, so whatever Pluto touches, it tends to drive with more intensity and so on. And then in this case, it's the principle of Saturn. So these last 2 years, in terms of, because it's a Saturn Pluto.
So
Saturn
so what is Saturn?
So to understand it fully, then we'd have to look at the archetype of Saturn, and then we can see how the two actually came together to formulate Like, I'll just say one thing, like just the lockdowns, for
Okay,
example.
because we weren't able to find anything from Pluto. What is the archetype of Saturn? And how can we point out one thing in the last couple of years where we say this is the effect of Saturn?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the Saturn-Pluto combination, because that's the difference. Like, all these things exist all the time, so there's always plutonic things that exist. But when it comes in alignment with Saturn, like it has the last 2 years, we get a very, very potent saturation of those two archetypal principles coming together. So one way I would just say, in terms of the last 2 years, I mean, Saturn is the principle of materiality, limitation, structures of things. It's like the container and alchemy. So Saturn is a very complex archetype, but those are just a couple things. And so the idea of like a lockdown of the whole world, where all of these quarantines, lockdowns, separation, isolation, masks on the face, all of it completely and totally fits the combination of Saturn and Pluto, because Saturn, that's the limitation, the blockage, the quarantining, the kind of quote unquote imprisonment kind of energy, being isolated. That's all the Saturn principle. And then Pluto intensified and drove that with an incredible amount of contraction energy to where the entire world contracted when these came into an alignment. That's, in my understanding, completely.
Sure, I guess that makes sense. And you did mention that Pluto is all about evolution, and we have seen rapid evolution, especially of the thing we're talking about, with all the different variants and everything coming out. So yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Well, I don't think when he said evolution in that one that I read, he wasn't necessarily referring to Darwinian evolution. I think just the concept of things evolving, because yeah, Pluto has that energy of like, I always feel like it's like digging into the soil and kind of stirring up the soil. So it's like that. But yeah,
rapid evolution of a lockdown causing organism. Totally makes sense. Also is a great example of evolution. So
yep. And Saturn and Pluto periods are often connected to where there's an acceleration in death. Basically, World War I was a Saturn-Pluto time period. World War II was a Saturn-Pluto. The Great Depression.
I love how you didn't. I love how you didn't take the bait on that evolution thing just now. It was good work, Gio.
Motherfucker said
Yeah,
lockdown
I felt like
causing
I felt
organisms.
there
I
were
was
periods
throwing
in
out
time.
softballs with that one.
You're saying these drastic periods in time line up with this Pluto Saturn thing or whatever.
Yeah. So basically, like, you know how there's like a new moon, and then there's the first quarter of the first part of the moon cycle, and then there's the full moon where it's full, and then there's the last third, basically the waxing and waning. So you have the waxing crescent, waning crescent, etc. And then you know how it goes back to a new moon, like that basic cycle.
All right.
Which is just sort of like the hour
Hey,
hand.
said,
the hour, like you have
who
the hour
said
hand.
lockdown?
You have the hour hand and the minute hand, and the hour hand is going to make a whole. So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is that each of these other, planets, luminaries, these other wandering stars, they are all doing that as well with each other. So Saturn and Pluto, because Saturn's going at a different speed than Pluto, basically they're going to do the same thing. They're going to be kind of like the new moon. That's called a conjunction. They're right at the same point in the sky. And then as they keep moving, Saturn will move, faster than Pluto. So Saturn will continue to move. At some point, it'll be 90 degrees, and that's like the opening, the crescent, the opening crescent of the moon cycle. And then once it gets to 180 degrees, that's the full moon. That's when the two planets are going to be 180 degrees from each other. And then it keeps going, and it makes the last 90-degree one. And then it comes back to the conjunction again. So in terms of Saturn and Pluto,
often does the conjunction happen?
That one is more rare. The actual conjunction, you're saying, for Saturn and Pluto.
Whenever this you said it lined up with World War II or something, right? Whatever that was, how often does that happen?
So Well, see, it's even a little bit more complicated because the time cycles actually change as well because of retrograde motion. But I won't go into that. So it varies, but
All right.
but in general, like a conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. Just to give you an example, like at World War II in the late like 40s, mid to late 40s, that was a conjunction, and then the next conjunction was in the early 80s.
That was one of the better. So you said it could have different effects. So you think the first one, the World War II, obviously created this chaotic effect, but then in the 80s, I feel like that was like maybe like a bet one of the good effects or something from this. No, because I love the 80s. I don't know about you guys.
Well, yeah, no, it's interesting with these cycles because, like I said, they're archetypally predictive, so they're working in their archetypes, but it's not concrete. So, like the Saturn Pluto in World War II was expressing in its way, but in the early '80s, the Saturn Pluto was different. That was when like a lot of there was like a contraction that happened in the financial system and in the whole political system right at that time. In that like administration. That came in at that time. So that Saturn Pluto was actually a pretty mild one, like considering, because Saturn Pluto periods can often be where there's like a lot of death and war, because that fits those archetypes as well. And unfortunately, these people in power, they know this and they use it to their benefit. 9/11 was also during a Saturn Pluto time period when 9/11 happened, and all the war and all the Saturn Pluto is also connected to like taking away our rights and freedoms, because Saturn is the limitation and then Pluto drives that. But Pluto is also connected to power, and Pluto is also connected to the underworld. So it's connected to those as well. So you get this power, the underworld, and that really intense energy with the Saturn energy. And we're actually in like one of the next major cycles of the Saturn Pluto since 9/11 as well, in terms of the cycle that's in the last 2 years as well.
And you expand on the underworld? Like, what do you mean when you say that?
Well, the archetype of Pluto is connected to like the Dionysian principle. That's why it's connected to like the Freudian id, because the idea of the id has that connection to the, but in this context, the underworld, there's a lot of different components of it, but it can be like in terms of the controllers, the people in power, in terms of how they're connected to Pluto, they're connected to the deep, seedy, underworld part of it, like underworld in that sense, like often like darker demonic spirits, greed, manipulation, all
Is
of
it like
those.
the unseen world?
Well, I think so. My viewpoint in terms of this whole system is you have the upper world, which is like, the heavens, the celestial. You have the middle world, which is the physical, the one that we're on, the plane of existence. And then there's whatever's under the earth, like the underworld. And each of those has their like connection in the spirit world, and it has their connection in the physical. So the spirit world part is like the heavens, the physical plane, and where the spirit interacts with the physical plane. Then the underworld part of the spirit world is like the void. It's like the demonic void. And so that's where all the dark energies reside on the spirit level. And then us being the plane of existence in the middle, we are the interface of that. And then there's also even like parts of the underworld that are connected to like the animalistic nature, like lions and things like that. But that's a little bit of a separate part. But yeah.
Hey, Gio, I just looked it up. On 9/11, Saturn and Pluto were opposing, not conjoined, right?
Yep. So there was an opposition, correct? Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, so basically the full moon of the Saturn-Pluto cycle, the opposition, 180 degrees, that's the full moon part of Saturn-Pluto, was during 9/11. And actually, to even make it more poignant, I mean, the right. level of, in terms of there being a creator, it's like, go ahead.
It was an opposition, not a conjunction. So it was the exact opposite of what you were just saying.
So the way that these work, the four most major aspects, they're called aspects. So the geometric relationships between them are called aspects. So the four majors are the conjunction. That's when they're right. It's the one I was mentioning before, that when it's right on top of each other. And then the 90 degree, as it gets to 90, that's another major. The 180 degree is a major. and then the last 90 is a major, and then back to the beginning. That's what's called the four major aspects. And that whenever these things align in any of those four ways, it's very, very potent interaction of those two principles. So basically during 9/11, it was an opposition 180 degrees. And even more so, there was an eclipse that happened and a full moon right on the Saturn-Pluto. So it's like the Saturn-Pluto was activated by an eclipse, like right before. It's really fascinating. But anyway, so that's part of it as well.
This seems to have
That's the opposition. And then now in then the financial crisis was when it was the square. So when there was the whole financial crisis, that was the 90. And then we're into the whole pandemic one, which is the conjunction, was where we're at now.
This sounds like it's less reliable than Noodles the Pug. So I'm going to stick with Noodles if it's all good with you.
I don't know, man. They predicted like some big shit happening with the new conjunction, the one happening now, and sure enough, man, I kind of doubted it too until I seen fucking.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was sitting here asking for post-dictions, and I couldn't even get a post-diction, let alone a prediction. So,
well, and those of us that do this work, I mean, what we're talking about is exactly what's done. I mean, basically understanding the principles and then being able to statistically and even scientifically correlate the actual events, which are tangible, to an acceleration of those events along with them. I mean, even for example, like another major one is the Uranus-Pluto cycle of the 1960s. So from 1960 to 1972, there was a conjunction. There was a conjunction of Uranus and Pluto. So in the last 2 years, we've had Saturn and Pluto, and that's the whole contraction of the pandemic thing. But in the 60s, this is Uranus and Pluto. So it's Pluto, but now with the principle of Uranus. And Uranus is connected to revolution, rebelliousness, like a lot of disruption, breakthroughs. I mean, I won't give a whole description on the archetype of Uranus, but Uranus is connected to that. And the whole 1960s were that whole just revolutionary period. In 1965, at the peak of it, that's when it was exactly when they were conjoined, like within 1 degree, because that's the middle of the cycle. That's sort of like 12 noon when the two hands are right on each other. And at that time, there was the most riots across the entire world, all the continents. The most number of cities were rioting than any other time in the 20th century. And it was also the only time that Uranus and Pluto made a conjunction, and it was when they got within 1 degree in that 1 year of 1965. So statistically, it just can't be denied. I mean, it's there. And I'm saying from my perspective, because of how much I've looked into it, I'm not trying to say that anyone else should just accept this until they've looked into it themselves or whatever it may be. But I'm saying to myself, I have found so many, it's just infinite, direct, statistical, scientifically validated correlations. Because you have a dependent and independent variable, and you have the direct actual, either experiences or events that are actually happening on Earth. So it's in my understanding, it's exactly the opposite of what they tell us. They tell us that quote unquote astrology is complete pseudoscience and is not verifiable. And my understanding of it is the complete opposite. And all the work that myself and other in these communities have done, it's as real as nature. And I think it is nature ultimately.
I mean, the positions of the luminaries, even in the globe model, can affect reality. No.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of my friends and colleagues within these fields, they're still believe in the globe. A lot of them. So, I mean, they haven't fully looked into stationary planar Earth yet. So I can't really say that they've all, fully looked into it all. But I'm just saying a lot of them are heliocentric globe earthers. So yeah, in their minds, they just what they think is that the creator created the globe and the heliocentric world, and it put the planets, these big ball planets, that it put them in the solar system in a particular place and put them on their own orbits in order so the whole thing is like a synchronistic system of what's happening on Earth.
No, I'm saying even in the globe model, they this isn't. I'm not even talking about your people. I'm talking about mainstream people. The where the moon and the sun and stuff is, what happens out there affects us here, like has physical effects here in reality.
Well, I think the most
As far
strict,
as like,
yeah, I think the most strict, like materialistic viewpoint on it, the most strict coming from like materialism would say that there's no, effect, right? I mean, I see, yeah.
like say you have a gravimeter or gravimeter, whatever one that's called. You're going to get different reading at a solar eclipse than you are when there's a solar eclipse happening antipodal, I'm guessing, right? And they also have other luminaries affecting what happens in the LIGO for say, like the positions and stuff that happens in space is affecting our physical reality, even according to like the hardcore materialists.
I think so. Yeah. Well, you're saying through gravity.
Just whatever, all kinds of stuff. The tides. Look at the tides. Wherever the moon is, they're saying it controls the tide. You know what I'm saying? They even to a hardcore glober materialistic person, even to them, the positions of these things is affecting our physical reality here on Earth. I mean, yeah, I guess that it'd all be gravity, but.
Well, I guess my understanding of it is I would think that the most hardcore materialism people would say that the moon does affect the tides because it's a satellite of Earth, and therefore the gravity between this big rock of the moon and the rock of the Earth is actually affecting the tides because of the actual gravity of the moon. But I think, when it comes when it comes to like Mercury and stuff, I think they would say that's too far away. But maybe there are theories like that. But yeah, go ahead, Brian.
They have stats, man. They have stats about emergency rooms on full moons and like business. Like if you own bars, there's more business during full moons. The emergency rooms are more full and crime and shit. So yeah, it does. I mean, it creeps into mainstream in their statistics and shit.
This is something. If anyone's ever heard of Lynn McTaggart and the intention experiments, I believe they did a bunch of them, maybe 10, but they were saying our minds could have your intention alone can affect physical reality, which seems possible because you got the placebo effect. Granted, it's affecting your own body, but still, it's your thoughts affecting physical reality. So I don't know. This made me think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that goes deep into, yeah, that's a very deep thing as well. I mean, I think that even links into, I think, how these actual luminaries, planets are actually, why they're actually synchronistically correlated with things. But what I was gonna say before as well, just linked to that, like what's known as astrology, like that field, even folks that are in that, even the good, like a lot, a lot of the people that really know what they're doing, they're up against an interesting thing because their model tells them that these are just physical ball rock planets out there, and therefore wouldn't be correlated with experiences on Earth. Wouldn't have any reason to be because they're just physical balls out there in their own orbits and gravity and all that. But so they have a model of the globe, but they know that the alignments actually are synchronistically connected to everything here on Earth. So it's like they're in a position where they know it actually is correlated. Now I don't think that, I mean, in general, they don't necessarily think that it's not like Mars is sending aggression from space or anything like that. It's not like Mars is actually sending, because Mars like represents aggression, for example, like anger and aggression. So it's not like the actual rock out there is sending it. And I would, even though I think Mars is a luminary, like an actual light in the sky, I don't necessarily think that Mars is beaming aggression down here. However, sort of like in the same example, like a clock doesn't make the time, it just indicates the time. In the same way, the positions of these luminaries, they're not necessarily causing it through like a causal effect. They're just indicating what the status is right now, like what the kind of the combinations of these, like basically it's like what's the archetypal status of the cosmos at this moment. It just indicates that in more of a, like a synchronistic. I mean, actually, it's kind of interesting talking about, like, I'm not into like relativity and all that, but actually, like some of those theories are I think were actually pulled from some ancient ancient, like the concept of non-locality, where you affect one thing and it affects something else, and even though it's remote. And that gets into like the thought experiments, like what you were just bringing up, like with Lynn McTaggart, is how like our minds are actually like interconnected, and so it gets into that as well, because like there does seem to be some way in which like the synchronistic moving of these luminaries is like intimately connected to each of us. So there's some way that they're connected, but it's not necessarily through the physical plane.
I actually agree with what you said about the when you said that the clock, it's not responsible for time. It's just telling you what time it is. That's actually how I look at the when I was doing horoscopes. That's how I look at the stars. It's more of a it's an identifier. Like let's say you're doing it from the day you were born. The sky, it was a unique printout. You know what I mean? Like a unique imprint on that day, like where everything was aligned and all that kind of stuff. And everybody's. I don't think there's any two days ever that have the same like exactly the same sky.
There are people that have the same charts though, like Charlie Chaplin and Adolf Hitler were actually born on the same day, so they actually have the same charts.
They have the same mustache.
And Charlie Chaplin actually played Hitler, so it's even.
That's right. Yeah. No, but I mean, when I say snapshot, I mean like, you remember that thing that I had on my computer that it showed like the retrograde and stuff. Like I look at those sometimes for different people's birthdays and stuff. But I mean like the star, the position, everything in the exact same positions. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, essentially that's
perfect.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we would look at in terms of like any type of. Although, was yours actually showing the interrelationships? Like, I'll post one here. This is the one from the software that I use.
Yeah.
And I somewhat customized it. I tweaked it a bit to kind of, but because there's a lot of different ways that you can have it look. But see, so that shows basically. So on a globe Earth, it would be kind of the globe in the middle, I guess, and then the solar system would all be spread around it. Of course, it doesn't show the difference in the distance, like Pluto or whatever versus the moon, obviously, so it doesn't show that dimension. Whereas like on a planar stationary Earth, essentially this would just be above the Earth in the sky. So like if you put an AE map under this, essentially it would be like that. Even with that though, it doesn't even show them in their positions because they're actually like going between the tropics, just like the sun and the moon do. So they would all have to be put there at their different little positions, but essentially an AE map under this. So like when these things are making like we were talking about during 9/11, there was a Saturn-Pluto opposition. That literally means that for the whole Earth, when you look up in the sky, those two things are 180 degrees from each other, like above a plane Earth. It's like a massive clock. And then these last 2 years during this whole pandemic thing is when it's been a conjunction. So that's like when it's a new moon type part of that cycle is when the Saturn and Pluto were conjoined. And at that point, then for everyone on Earth, they're like right next to it. They're in the exact same spot in the sky. So it's just fascinating to think about how it's like physically happening, and then how from all my observations, it's like the events of life are completely correlated with their positions, and even to the point to where like the tighter in degree that they get is when the phenomenon even gets stronger. Then it gets looser as it kind of starts to separate away from when they start to separate away from each other. It's like unbelievably timed like that, because I've watched it in my own life too, and seen how these cycles unfold in that way too, like direct, from direct experience.
Is this astrology? Is that what you're describing?
Is astrology?
Yeah, although I don't use that term these days myself. But yeah, because the word astro means, well, it does mean star, but it also means like from outside the atmosphere. It has that kind of correlation. So I just don't really resonate with that terminology. But yeah, it would be considered astrology. There's also a group which is archetypal astrology. So there's also that, which which is somewhat connected to the group that I at the graduate school that I went to. A lot of them are transpersonal psychology and also archetypal astrology. The word that I have been using is luminariology.
There's a sort of ring to it. Yeah, do you remember that day though? When I had that map out, and you saw it. The reason I was looking at it was because I was trying to match. I was trying to use the sun's position to find out where the star's position was, basically. And what was crazy was I would go back a year to the exact same day to see if where the sun was in relationship to that star, and it was like it wasn't in the exact same spot. Like it would be sometimes further away, sometimes closer, sometimes on the other side of it. So it's just kind of it's crazy how that's what I'm saying about the snapshot, because it's one thing to have all the main wandering stars or whatever to be near each other or in somewhat conjunction or whatever, but to have things like perfectly in the same position, the same relationship to each other. I bet that every single night is probably unique in that way.
I wouldn't doubt that the sky is some sort of is because it's everybody has a view of the sky, right? So wouldn't the truth be in the sky somehow, like our own personal mini map or map or whatever? You know, like when you play Grand Theft Auto, and you have like a little mini map on the side and shit. Isn't that like what the sky is to everyone? I'm just saying hypothetically, if God were to send a message to mankind, wouldn't the easier thing to the easier place to place this message it would be in the sky?
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Absolutely, I agree. I think it. I mean, essentially, like my understanding of the sky is that you have like the fixed stars, which we call fixed, and those are the ones that seem to all be moving at the same pace at 23 hours 56 minutes. And then within those, you have what's called the constellations, which basically just the layout of those stars. And then there's 12 constellations. 12 times 30 is 360. So each one is 30 degrees. So you have 12 30-degree sections of the actual sky field of those fixed stars. And then that whole thing is rotating at 23 hours 56 minutes, one whole rotation. But then we have all these other, like the sun, the moon, Mercury, all of those. And then they're all moving at their different paces, and they're all moving different. So kind of like Kosher said before, like there's no two moments that are the same. It's always novel. It's always new. There's always a new system of correlations. As far as we know, I don't know how many years you'd have to go back. I don't think it ever, well, that's a whole question. Like, where did these even start? Because how could you even get back to knowing where they even all started from? That's getting deep though.
So what you're saying is that they don't do in like a pattern that you could trace back all the way to quote unquote the beginning of time, that they change and you have to adjust it every time.
Well, they're all moving. They're all moving. Like, okay, I guess I'll say it this way. You know how like a race car track, and then let's say there's like 10 cars that are all racing around the track, but like one of them's going 30 miles an hour, the other one's going 40, another one's going 20, another one's going 60, whatever, different speeds. That's kind of how I understand it in that sense, to where you have the fixed stars, which are all moving the fastest. Those are every day, 23 hours, 56 minutes faster than the sun. And then the sun is like a race car, but the sun's going only 4 minutes slower than the stars. So the sun's going just a little slower. And that's why we get, the day cycle. And because the sun is moving a little slower than the fixed stars, that's why we see different parts of the sky at different times of the year, because the sun is always losing pace on the fixed stars. And then all of the other ones, Mercury, Venus, etc., they're all going slower than the sun as well. So they're all going at their speeds that are all slower than the sun.
Is it like a chasing kind of thing? Like every luminary is chasing the sun for some reason?
Well, they're all kind of like lapping each other. Like the faster ones, lap the slower ones. The only connection really to the sun being centered is simply there's no real sun-centeredness because they're all just moving in the same track. Like let's imagine the racetrack is the Tropic of Cancer and then the equator and Tropic of Capricorn. Like that's the racetrack of the Earth. And then the lanes would just be like, if you're in the north area, you'd be in, like the Tropic of Cancer lane or whatever. And then if you're out in the outer one, the Tropic of Capricorn lane. But if we imagine that being the whole racetrack, like the sun, they're all just moving around the track, between the tropics is how I understand it. And so like this, and then the sun is just moving at its own pace. The only thing about the sun is that the Mercury and Venus, they never get very far from the sun. So Mercury only gets like 21 degrees at the most. And then Venus is like 40, 45 degrees is the furthest it gets. So it's kind of like, I guess like in the idea of race cars, if you have the sun and then let's say Mercury goes a little bit faster than the sun and then it slows down, goes the same speed as the sun, and then it slows down and goes slower than the sun. Then it picks up speed again and goes the same speed as the sun, and then it goes faster than the sun, etc. It keeps doing that. And it never gets further than like that 20 degrees, 21, I believe, it never gets further than that. So, I mean, could you call that Mercury's orbiting the sun? Well, in the heliocentric model, they had to make it that way. They had to put Mercury in the middle and to have it doing that. But like on a planar stationary Earth type understanding, like it doesn't necessarily have to be orbiting it. It could just be going faster than it and then slower and then faster. Like it's simply, I call it more of like a phasing, like it's just phasing back and forth. And in my understanding, there's no way to validate that actually, anything's actually orbiting around anything else in that way.
Is the word track something that's used a lot in astrology? Like
no.
track system?
Not necessarily, no.
Because I heard you use it and rung a few bells because I actually have a few people on YouTube that they are convinced that the luminary is running like a track system that is like some sort of railroad kind of thing. And they call it track system. So when you were saying it, I assumed for some reason it was like an astrology phrase.
Well, I like that. I like the idea of tracks. I think in astrology, as far as I'm aware of, that word is not necessarily a major point of it. I guess they would call them orbits because a lot of them are going to still be in the heliocentric, system. So they might call them orbits. I think the idea of tracks is cool. Also, or like a circuit. Or even both, like a track circuit. I like that concept.
Actually, the earth and the buildings and supposedly the countries and those things are supposedly laid out like a motherboard. So the earth will be the circuit board or whatever. That there's also a few people saying that mountains are like melted buildings and shit. That is not really mountain. It's not like a natural formation like the mainstream story. That every building has like a function, it's constructed like a dial, like a resistor. So, bro, it's pretty. Have you ever heard that?
Dude, that's awesome. We should continue that in the after show because I think we've gone a little bit past the show time. So I should close the show up, but we should continue that because dude, that is a fascinating discussion. The idea of the Earth being like a free energy motherboard system, and then that links into like a lot of these ancient sites. Like I'd love to talk more about that with you as well because like that's just so fascinating to me. Like that some of these like pyramid sites are actually circuit boards, and also like the star forts like may have actually been circuit board systems that were just used to channel the energy of the Earth, possibly free energy, possibly communication technology. Like all of that, that's just fascinating to me that there used to be possibly like, a whole different form of power on the Earth.
Sky's the limit.
But yeah, so I'm gonna close out the actual main show here. So if anyone wants any final thoughts, I'd
like to say something, man. I got my Cavendish. I got all the bulbs filed down, all my molds made, and I got the shit set up. And I'm gonna, I did the lead, but obviously I'm gonna, pretty much doing this little experiment to test out everything else. Sand, water, different kinds of metal, every kind of liquid, just everything, man. Concrete. I'm going to test everything and see what conclusions we could come. What conclusions we draw, expand in that experiment. And so if we want, we could talk about that a little bit tomorrow and everything. But so I'm just throwing that out there.
Nice, bro. That is awesome. So you're gonna that'd be great. I would love to see that. You're gonna be able to do a Cavendish with different materials.
Yeah. I got my big balls are 60 pounds. They're heavy, man. They're like in between the size of a softball and a soccer ball. They're pretty big. And the little ones are like 6 pounds. And I just made I just kind of slapped it together. It ain't pretty, but it's as far as functionality, it's perfect, man. It doesn't want to sit still. I'll tell you that. And I went and set it up in a place that I'm not going to keep it, but just to lay it out for the lines and the wires. But plus, I have 4 different kinds of wires. I have copper, steel, welding wire, and right now I got just fishing line. I'm gonna go with the no metal setup first. I'm gonna do the PVC in the fishing line, then I'm gonna do the copper wire. But right when I first set it up, I took one of the 60-pound balls and set it next to the little ball, just getting it laid out, and it repelled it. So, that's obviously probably electrostatics, but is the attraction part electrostatic? So hopefully I'm taking any suggestions, anything anybody could think of, and we'll put our heads together and expand this experiment and see what all we can come up with, man.
Brian, that sounds great. I absolutely agree. I do think there's an effect happening. I don't think it's mass attracting mass, but I do think there's an effect. And so, yeah, I love that you're doing that. I also just had a thought too. It'd be interesting to see. I know that if you do something outside, you have to deal with wind and other factors, but I'd really be interested to see the difference with a Cavendish, whether it's like exposed to the sky versus inside of a building. And exposed to the sky would also be interesting, like maybe a clear sky versus cloudy sky, different cycles, like we're talking about with the sun.
Yeah, different elevation. So
elevation,
so let's save that, man. And talk about it next show, man. That'd be great, man.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right,
Cool.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, yeah, we can continue in the after show, but does anyone else have any like either final thoughts or updates or anything? Any news or anything?
No, good show, everyone. Come check us out on Earth Awakenings. We'll be doing this for a while in the after show. We had this going all night last night.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, either now or if you're gonna watch it later, you can. We're all of these. The panel is run from the Earth Awakenings Discord server, so anyone's welcome to join and come by and come on the panel. The link is in the lower right hand part of the stream. You'll see the link down there. You can just put that right in your web browser, and then it'll bring you to the server. And then also it's in the YouTube description as well. So, but yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and yeah, we'll do a show tomorrow as well. Probably. It's getting a little bit closer to Christmas, so I'll have to think of whether we'll do one on the 23rd. We'll do one on the 23rd for sure. So we'll do one tomorrow, which will be Thursday, and then definitely not on Christmas, of course, and then the day before, possibly not. I guess we can kind of figure that out and decide. But I would say yeah, but there won't be a show on Christmas Day though. But yeah, so yeah, thanks everyone, and see you tomorrow for the show tomorrow. And then I'm just going to stop the show stream, and then I'm going to just start up the after show stream right away. And then, yeah, we can continue the combos.
Nice civil discussions. Didn't get too crazy, right?
Yeah, today was definitely different than yesterday. So, all right, yeah, I'm gonna close the stream out. So, yeah, talk to you guys. Pick up on the show tomorrow.